Blog Talk Radio.
All right, welcome everybody. Hope you're having a great weekend. Hey, Amy, how's it going?
It's going pretty well. So I don't think anybody caught our little back and forth before, but the first thing I said when you turned on the live stream a little bit ago was, "Oh, the brown blob." Um, I tried to keep up with the Brooks. I put a piece of sculpture behind me over there, but you say it looks just like a brown blob, basically.
Yeah,
right?
it needs lighting. It needs a spotlight on it.
Okay. I tried. That's
But
my sending reproduction over there that I've got off of eBay. I was so lucky to find that reproduction. So we do what we can.
yep, good.
Anyway, how are you?
We're back to talking about Trump.
We are. There's just so much this week. And I noticed, by the way, I did watch the interview with Dale Stevens the other day, and that was really interesting. Would you indulge me and let me tell a story?
Sure.
Because he talked about lie detector tests and how he didn't think that they were actually reliable.
No, he was talking about this new technology that supposedly by wiring something to your brain, he didn't think that was reliable. I don't know that he said anything about lie detector tests generally.
I think he was saying someday they're going to maybe come up with one, or they think they finally came up with one, but he doesn't think so. Something like that. Anyway, one time I had to take one. Can I tell you the story?
Sure.
So I was 19 and I was in retail management, and they wanted to do this bonding procedure where they bond you, I guess, for honesty and other things. And so they sit you down and they ask you a bunch of questions. And the idea is they ask you the questions, then they hook you up to the machine that's supposedly a lie detector test.
Yep.
And they ask you the same questions again to make sure that you didn't lie, I guess. And so one of the questions they asked me was, "Have you tried marijuana?" And I said, "No." And they didn't believe me. And so they kept saying, "Well, I'm in Southern California and I'm 19 years old and I don't look like a complete geek."
Yeah.
And they're saying, "What do you mean you haven't tried marijuana? It's really okay. It's fine. They don't care. We just want to know that you're telling us the truth, right?" So, God, I'm really sorry to disappoint you, but I haven't tried marijuana, and I hadn't. And I guess the lie detector test came out fine, whatever it's supposed to tell you. But anyway, no, I was reminded of that story because of.
So were you lying or weren't you?
No, I wasn't lying. I hadn't tried it. I
No.
tried it in college a little bit later, but when I was 19, I had not still tried marijuana, which put me, I guess, in a very small minority of not totally, completely geeky.
Even this geeky Israeli tried it by 19, 15. But that was it. Never.
Yeah. Of course, I didn't even know that maybe the lie detector wasn't reliable anyway, but it wouldn't have mattered to me one way or the other. But it was funny. And then the other thing, just as a point of interest, if people haven't heard the interview, they should go and listen to it.
Yeah.
I was fascinated to hear about the and I don't know the terminology. Sorry, Dale, I'm going to botch it. It's just going to be my summary of it. But he was talking about how for depression, they will still use the more invasive sort of like seizure inducing electroshock therapy, but that I can't remember if he was doing work with this directly or just, telling you about it that somebody else was doing, but more superficial stimulation of the brain over like a period of a week could achieve the same effect non-invasively or something and help depression patients. That's pretty exciting. It's still odd because, with that or with the medication, they don't know any causal mechanism for this. Like they can't identify why it works. They just say, well, somehow it works, right?
Well, part of it turns out that when you're in depression, I guess it's this cycle where you can't break out of it. So you can't use cognitive therapy to break out of it because you're overwhelmed by the drugs, by the chemicals in your brain or whatever it is that the brain.
Or the lack of chemicals or something. Yeah.
That's it. So that you can deal with the fundamentals through cognitive therapy. I guess, but yes, there's very little still understanding. One of the things I find interesting is I find this generally people talk about stuff like this as if they know what they're talking about. So Sam Harris will talk about, I don't know, neuroscience as if it's a done deal, as if we know, and we're just starting. We're just, and the same with psychology. People will talk about psychology as if it's a done field and there's a whole science and we know everything, and now we're just figuring out the details. And the fact is that these sciences are just at their very, very beginnings. And to talk about them in definitive ways, the way so many people do, is absurd. You have to take into account that we're just at the beginning. We're at the, I don't know, pre-atomic, I'm trying to parallel those with physics, but I probably shouldn't. But the point is that it's still very, very early in terms of our understanding of the brain, of the mind, of the relationship between the two, and of psychology generally.
Yeah. One more little tiny story.
Sure.
You guys were talking about driving and all the things that the brain does so quickly and automatically in order to drive properly. And when I was
properly, some people don't.
Well, right.
Well, you claim that I drive like a New York taxi driver.
I don't claim that. I just sit there and hold on for my life whenever I'm in a car with you.
Amy at the airport, this is 20 years ago or something, and we were driving, and she said, "Oh my God, you drive like a New York taxi driver," and she was gripping the sides of the chair like she was going to die any moment. But yes, no, I think it's a pretty factually accurate description of how I drive.
I didn't realize that I had said that. I only remembered a more recent time that I was in the car with you and just kind of nervous and
you thought about it without
probably. I mean, I don't think that phrase came to mind that I recall, but I recall being a little bit on edge, But I think it's because whenever I'm in a car, I'm almost always driving. And so you just don't have that sense of control. But going back to you and Dale, you were talking about how the brain is doing so many things with the driving and how it's really quite amazing because there's all this going on. I actually chose deliberately not to drive for a while when I was 16 because I found that there was just so much and I didn't understand that my brain was going to automatize it. So I actually didn't get my license till I was 18.
Oh, well. Yeah. I in Israel, you couldn't get it before 18 when I was growing up. Now you can get it at 17, I think, or 16.
Okay.
All right. You want to jump in?
Yeah. Trump time. Here we go.
All right.
And this is the question that occurred to me. What kind of America is Trump putting first? And there's a few different areas of his policy that were elaborated through his comments and other things this week that we can look at. We can look at the latest stuff in the trade economics, the criticisms of the Koch brothers I found to be quite revealing.
Wow.
Those are crazy. And then, of course, there's the comments on free speech and the media. He seems to be anointing his favorites and singling them out. And at the same time, he has let sit out there this idea that he believes that he actually stands behind this statement that the press is the enemy of the people. And I found all of that to be quite disturbing. I've also got the latest in the Tommy Robinson on the program notes if people are interested in that too. That's over at don'tletitgo.com. I'm sorry that a lot of the program notes are just tweets. Sometimes I've got just Trump's tweets freestanding. Some of them I've got my responses to them. But there was so much that he was doing out there on Twitter that was remarkable in the sense of worth remarking on, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think the Koch brothers attacks are particularly interesting. I mean, here are two, some of the most successful businessmen in the last 50 years in America. I mean, people talk about Trump as a successful businessman. If you take how much the Koch brothers inherited and what they made of it versus how much Trump inherited and what he made of it, they are far, far more successful in terms of just wealth creation. But more than that, these are people who probably for the last, I don't know, since the late 70s, I'd say. So what's that, 40 years? For the last 40 years have been the biggest supporters and promoters of free markets, probably in the world, if not but certainly in the United States. They were essential to starting up a lot of the libertarian think tanks, a lot of the libertarian programs at universities, whether it's George Mason Economics Department, where Austrian economics is being taught, which they really, founded, started, whether it's the law department, George Mason, which is a big law in economics with a bit of free market tilt, I guess. Now, none of these things are perfect. None of them are objectivist, and certainly the Kochs are not objectivist. But if you value free markets, and if you value the work of free market economists and legal scholars, then nobody has done more to promote those ideas in America over the last 40 years than the Koch brothers have. They've invested tens, if not hundreds of millions of dollars in university programs and think tanks. They full disclosure, they support, not by a huge amount, but they support the Ayn Rand Institute. They support, but they support almost every free market entity that's out there. They either were involved in founding it or have been supporters of it, anything that was founded over the last 40 years. So these are real free market advocates, in many respects, heroes. Their attacks at the Koch, think about their attacks, particularly, was it 2, 3, 4 years ago? They were like the devil. Whatever the right does to George Soros,
right,
the left did worse to the Koch brothers. I mean, there are books out there. There are millions and millions of things attacking the Koch brothers from
demonizing
the left.
them. Yeah.
Every conspiracy theory in the world is attacks the Koch brothers that's generated from the left. And now we get a Republican president attacking them as well. So now we get attacks from Trump. And why? Because Trump can't handle anybody disagreeing with him. Trump can't handle any criticism. Trump can't handle anybody saying anything negative about him. And the Kochs, during their last, the Kochs do, I think, 2 a year. They do these big conferences where they bring all these donors and they raise money primarily to support Republican candidates. And this year, and the latest one, I guess they attacked Trump's trade policies and other policies, because the Koch brothers are free market guys, and actually believe, counter to Trump and his minions, in free trade. And so they attack Trump, and Trump has just gone after them.
Yeah. Well, so the one that inspired the show, there were a number of tweets from him this week. There's one that's a 2-parter, and then this other one. And he talks about Charles Koch in his tweet. And he says that, quote, Koch made the, quote, ridiculous statement that what President Trump is doing is unfair to foreign workers. I'm still quoting Trump. Trump says he is correct, America first, end quote from Trump. And, first, so it is ridiculous. Apparently it's supposed to be ridiculous to be concerned about being unfair to foreign workers. Foreign workers are a tremendous potential source of value to any rational person. And these are people that you would want to be fair to, right? Because you would, at least if you just want to say pragmatically speaking, you'd like to get the value from these. Some of these people are genius entrepreneurs. It's bizarre.
And the fact is, all human beings have rights. Not just Americans.
Yes.
All human beings have rights. Individual
Yes.
rights is not individuals, parentheses, American rights, but all individuals have rights. And if you're an individual in the territory of the United States of America, then it is the job of the government to protect your rights. That is what the government is there to do.
Well, true, but even if they're not in the territory, right? Even if they're not in the territory, they are human beings. And part of the values on which America was founded was all human beings are created equal. Now, it's not, they're not created equal if they happen to have been born outside United States and then somehow we do. Now, I'm not saying completely open immigration, no border checks, all the people who keep saying that I'm for this. This morning, I got some brave anonymous Twitter user, who created the account just to troll people or whatever, right? One of those telling me I'm trying to turn United States into the third world country or something like this. Yeah, check at the border for security risks. But otherwise, when people want to come in here and be productive and provide value, yes, we should be concerned about being fair to them. Being fair to fellow human beings is part of what America is, and it doesn't stop at the border at all. And this is what I say in the tweet. What kind of America are we putting first if we set aside the very American idea that all men are created equal and endowed with rights? Now, I don't believe that there's a creator that endows people with rights, but as human beings, I believe that we have qualities about us that, in virtue of which that we have rights, we should be protected from all. initiation of force. And certainly we should be treated fairly as
Absolutely.
human beings.
Including
So
illegal
how is
immigrants,
it
by the way.
ridiculous? How is it ridiculous to be concerned about that? And he's saying that basically putting America first means thinking it's ridiculous to be concerned about being unfair to foreign workers. In effect, we have to be unfair to foreign workers to put America first.
Yeah, I mean, I've said this from from when first he coined the term "Make America Great Again." Donald Trump has no idea what America is.
Mm-hmm.
He is a nationalist. For him, America is a set of borders and the people who happen to have been born within those borders. That is what America is. And whatever the ideas inside of those borders, whatever the regime is inside of those borders, as long as you have the right birth certificate, and as long as you're in those borders with the right birth certificate, you are placed first. And there is nothing that the government should do. If you believe in free market, if you pretend to believe in free market, then there is no concept of fairness to American workers. There's no role for the government to play in the American worker. All the government is supposed to do is defend and protect individual rights. Which means it's supposed to allow for free market and protect property rights. It's supposed to allow for free trade and prevent barriers from trade. Indeed, the initial purpose of the Navy was to allow for free trade, to allow ships to come in and out of the United
Those
States.
trading channels, yeah.
Pirates and free of of course the British Navy for the whole 19th century, or much of the 19th century, used gunboat diplomacy to open up ports to make sure that trade was allowed. Donald Trump's doing the opposite. But to allow this, and then whatever happens to American jobs or American workers happens to American jobs and American workers. There was no concern about American jobs when, during the 19th century, we brought in millions of immigrants, because the idea was that America was not a set of specific people. The idea was not that America was a set of a specific geography. The idea was that America was a set of ideas that animated a particular geography, that animated the people within that particular geography, but that these ideas, first of all, were true for everybody. So there was the whole idea of American exceptionalism, the whole idea of these ideas that should be exported out to the world and that other people should embrace it. And if you came to America, you would live under those ideas, and wow, what a wonderful place it would be. And some of us, like me, are foreigners. We're foreigners, we're immigrants, we're evil immigrants who came to this country and don't have the right birth certificate. And the idea that America, and that's true of Ayn Rand, and that's true of Leonard Peikoff, and that's true of most of the people I admire. It's true of about 50% of the founders of the best startups in Silicon Valley. It's true of the so-called robber barons in the 19th century. Many of them were immigrants. The idea that this should be demonized in any kind of way, we shouldn't treat them fair, that's not America. That's a nationalistic, collectivistic approach to the kind of America Donald Trump wants, and it's anti-American. I mean, I've started to say this. Donald Trump is anti-American. He's anti the ideas that made America great, and he is the most explicit in his anti-Americanism, at least from the right that we've ever seen. And Obama was anti-American in a sense of America's just like everybody else in the world. We're nothing special. There's no exceptionalism. Right. And Donald Trump has embraced that. He has completely embraced that. There's nothing special about America, which is
there's nothing special about us, but still we should put ourselves first
because it's ourselves. Because we're the collective, we're this tribe. Yeah. But there's nothing special about this tribe in terms of ideas. There's something special about
just the tribe.
Just the tribe.
You could say he's for free
some
trade.
People say Trump wants the best immigrants, right? But does he, right? He wants some of the best immigrants, but he wants half the number of immigrants. He wants as little immigration as possible. And he wants to pull up walls. He wants to create trade barriers. He wants to do everything to protect. So he's anti-free markets. He's explicitly anti-free markets.
And that's one thing I was going to say. This week, he did not use free trade in a tweet against the Koch brothers, he used the phrase powerful trade.
Yes.
Powerful trade. So he was criticizing the so-called globalist Koch brothers.
Yes.
Why? Because they are against powerful trade. And I mean, all you Trump supporters, you've been telling me, really, he's for free trade. That's really what he's for. And here he is. He's criticizing the Koch brothers in this tweet. Why? Because they are against powerful trade. The implication is that's what he's for. He's for, quote, powerful trade. And we're seeing what that is.
That doesn't even mean anything. What he's for is, America, robustness in trade, which is completely
trade surplus. That's powerful. However you get there.
I think it's powerful trade. But yes, I mean, the Koch brothers are true free traders. The Koch brothers believe in free trade. The Koch brothers are true free marketers. And the fact that he's so viciously attacking them just shows the fact that he is not, that he represents everything that the Koch brothers do not. So the Koch brothers here are definitely the good guys, even though I'm critical of a lot of what the Koch brothers do.
Sure.
And he's the bad guy. And listen to this, right? I mean, this is typical Donald Trump. Charles Koch of the Koch brothers, who claims to be giving away millions of dollars to politicians, even though I know very few who have seen this. Now, notice what he's done there. Charles Koch claims to be giving away millions of dollars.
Mm-hmm.
What is that about? So but he's not saying he really denies that. So even though I know very few, again, he is say the word.
What, ignorant?
No, innuendo.
Innuendo. Sure, yeah, innuendo.
Innuendo to suggest the Koch brothers are liars when he is the one clearly lying here, because there's a ton of evidence, factual evidence, that the Koch brothers spend more money on politics on the right than any other group or entity out there.
And perhaps there's a reason that he knows very few who have seen this, because he's a crony dude.
No, but that's a lie, because he knows almost every Republican in Congress has gotten money, or he hasn't gotten any money from them. The Koch brothers,
that's what he's complaining about, right?
But everybody in the Republican Party has seen money from them. The idea that he doesn't know people who've seen the money is complete, utter lie. It's exactly what Donald Trump does constantly, is lie about these things and lie blatantly. That's the thing again about Donald Trump that makes him a unique type of liar. Mm-hmm. He doesn't try to hide the fact that he's lying. He doesn't try to provide any kind of disguise to the lie. He just says stuff, and he doesn't care if it's BS or if it's true or if it's not true or anything. He just says what he thinks will diminish his opponents, and he doesn't care whether it's factual at all. He has no consideration for the facts. He is a unique phenomena in that sense. I've never seen anybody like him that does this. Everybody knows factually that the Koch brothers gives hundreds of millions of dollars to support the Republican candidates, Republican causes. Everybody knows this. It's factual, and yet the president of the United States has suggested they don't.
But Hillary.
Liars
Hillary
are not egoists. So you can't be an egoist and a liar. That is a contradiction.
Well, and maybe that's something, you could get a Greg Salmieri on or Onkar, right? To talk a little bit more and give people what Rand used to call the truck-like reality about the connection between stuff they care about and the fact that Donald Trump is just blatantly disregarding the facts. He's willing to lie and all that stuff. I think a lot of people don't get very passionate about epistemology. And of course, you and I will talk about him more at the level of politics. You often, talk about this issue with him as well. But maybe explaining to people why in the world should they care that their president just has such a blatant disregard for the truth. Right now, all of the Trump supporters, like I said, they're just saying, but Hillary lied. Hillary lied, and she did.
Yeah, well, that's not what I'm getting on Twitter. So Twitter, we've got 2 or 3 Trump supporters who obviously saw the title of this and decided to show up, and they're using all caps.
Yeah.
Just to show how ridiculous.
Powerful.
But yeah, I mean, it's look, all politicians lie. Granted, all of them lie. But the difference is that most of them respect their audience enough, in a sense, to try to hide the fact that they're lying. There's an element of embarrassment about the lying. They couch it. Donald Trump is the only person I know who doesn't care one way or the other. And here he's using lying to attack some of the biggest defenders of free markets ever. So the real socialist, because I'm being accused of being a socialist on YouTube, the real socialist is Donald Trump, because here he is attacking the people who spent more money defending free markets than anybody on the planet over the last 40 years, anybody on the planet. And he's attacking them for what? Because they said something nice about treating foreign workers, because they are for free trade, where Donald Trump is for the leftist socialist fair trade, which was a Bernie Sanders
Powerful trade.
Powerful trade now. Yeah, I don't know what that means. That sounds a nationalist, not socialist, but nationalist. So national socialist. Yeah. So
can I irk the Trump supporters then?
I've met Charles Koch, by the way, and he's an incredibly nice guy, really smart. I mean, he has read an enormous amount. He knows an enormous amount. He is a true believer in the efficacy and morality of markets. Unfortunately, he's not an objectivist. I wish he was, but he is about as close as you can be, I guess, without in his defense of capitalism, without completely agreeing with Ayn Rand's philosophy. I'm a fan of I'm a major fan of what the Kochs are trying to do. Again, I don't agree with everything that they do, but I agree.
What is their point of disagreement with the philosophy?
I don't know. I don't think they're philosophical. I think it's a big problem among libertarians.
I mean, are they religious or?
No, they're not religious.
Okay.
Completely secular. They're completely secular.
Little altruistic, maybe.
Yeah, I think getting over the altruism is very, very difficult for people. I think people don't appreciate how difficult it is to truly shrug off the altruism. Mm-hmm. And look, a lot of the support for Trump is generated by altruism, because collectivism and nationalism are driven by altruism. The idea that even the idea that we should care about the American worker is driven by by altruism. Altruism leads to collectivism, and this is a form of collectivism. So altruism is very, very difficult to overcome. The idea that you should care above and beyond anything that has to do with your personal life, that you should care about others as the dominant concern that you have, is, I've said this many times, that the fact that every time I give a talk, no matter what the topic is, no matter Ayn Rand comes up, the first question is, but what about the poor? And what about these people? And what about those people? And what about, nobody thinks about, well, how does this affect my life? I mean, that's not the first thing that we're trained to think about when we're discussing ethics or politics or anything like that. So it's all about, well, what about others? And who do I need to be concerned about? Because who's suffering out there? Even people who claim to have rejected that, it's very, very difficult to truly extricate that from one's thinking, because we're so inculcated with it from when we're alive. Instead of everything you should think about should be, as the primary should be, how does this affect me? Now, how does this affect me? The me obviously includes other people, because other people are valued to you, but the primary should be me. How does this affect me? Right. And then how does it affect the people close to me? And how does it affect the people slightly further away? But not start with the furthest away people possible and then come in. That's what altruism trains the mind to do. Right? Yeah,
and the real altruist says you should care first about what it does to the people you don't value at all.
Exactly.
But
that's what it said, go for the poor, or if you're going to help people, go to Africa. Don't go help people in your neighborhood. Help people as far away from you that you should care the least about, that you value the least objectively. Start with them and then work inwards, rather than start, if at all, working towards yourself, instead of starting with yourself and then work outwards. So
right.
It's
Anyway, I know I was just curious, kind of where his disagreement was. But do you mind if I scandalize the Trump supporters? I mean, probably they've tuned out by now, but if any of them are still there. Okay.
They don't leave.
Okay.
They're convinced that, I guess, if they put everything in caps and they yell loud enough that
he does that.
Our minds.
He does that.
or maybe they're just trying to convince the other people on the chat who
Yeah.
might be supporters of ours anyway, go ahead.
Yeah. So any Trump supporter, I imagine, probably has used the phrase taxation is theft at some point in the past. Remember when there was another president? Yeah. Taxation is theft. You know, I remember that. It was so cute. They had the memes. They were so funny and everything. Everybody passing them around, laughing. Taxation is theft. But now, you know, this is all part of nostalgia. We can't have that anymore. Why? Because another ground on which Trump attacked the Koch brothers is because they would like to avoid paying taxes as much as possible. Imagine that you would want to actually avoid paying taxes, you know, say move to Puerto Rico or something because the tax burden is lower. This is him talking about taxes. First of all, he says that because he's lowered taxes, he made them richer. He's made the Koch brothers richer. So he's buying into that establishment speak, whereby if they give a tax cut, that somehow they're responsible for making people richer, as opposed to all they're doing is they're letting people keep more of the wealth that they've created. So he's using that same language that all the leftists use, you know, when they talk about, oh, we don't know if we can afford to give you a tax cut, as if it's their money to dispense and everything. He's using that same language. And then he talks about,
but that's not unusual. He uses the left's language often. Again, fair trade is the left's language. Tariffs are a leftist tactic. So the fact that he views it, I gave you a tax cut, I made you wealthier, that's a leftist approach to wealth, which is very typical. And Trump is using it. That's not surprising.
No. But, you know, here he is. He's doing it to attack the Koch brothers. And he says they want to protect their companies outside the U.S. from being taxed. I'm for America first and the American worker, a puppet for no one. If he's for America first, he's an American worker. He's a puppet to some weird nationalism. He's actually, I think, a puppet for big voting blocks and things like that. But that's a whole nother
Well, the
thing.
real question is, why is the American worker the primary? Why not the American capitalist? Why isn't the American creator, the builder, the entrepreneur? That what, you know, he is reversing Ayn Rand's pyramid of ability. You know, our philosophy is so focused on the man of reason, the producer, the creator, the builder, and he's focused constantly on a kind of a Marxist approach, the leftist approach, which is the American worker. Screw you, American businessman, he says to Koch brothers.
You'd call it more populist? More
Well, he's
populist?
a populist, yes.
Yeah.
And populism is typically an appeal to the lowest common denominator. That's part of what populism is, and that's what he's doing. So he's not about the exceptional. He's not about the extraordinary. He's not about ability per se. He is about the American worker, just the average guy or less than the average guy. That's what he cares about. And it really is unbelievable that here he is about complaining about businessmen who want to reduce their taxes, right?
Yeah.
And he's done this over and over and over again, right? He's complained about
Bezos.
Apple, complained about Bezos. He's complained about others who've moved their incorporation to other countries in order to reduce their taxes. He's complained about that because, again, it goes against his collectivist nationalist rhetoric. And but I also don't think he believes in anything particular. I think the populism, the nationalism, is a guise to, he says whatever he thinks is going to result in the people he cares about liking him, which is his base. He tries stuff out, and if it works, and if the base likes it, he repeats it. He's not so he is anti-ideology. He has no real system of beliefs other than what'll make people. I mean, narcissism is the psychological characteristic that most identifies him. Make the people he cares about like him. That's
right. And he actually ends up having a tweet about that that I've included in the program notes a little bit later when we go back sort of to the issue of what he's done with the tariffs and what sort of economy it has created. I've got a new phrase I'll try out on you and you see what you think of it. Okay. But this idea about the taxes, right? He is condemning people for wanting to avoid paying taxes, and he's taking credit for giving people lower taxes. So, lower taxes are good if he's the one allowing you to have them out of the generosity of his heart or something like this. He's doing a favor for you by letting you keep more of your wealth. But how dare you take rational business steps to minimize your tax burden? Of course, he did it all the time, and he declared bankruptcy to avoid taxation.
Yeah.
So it's so, hypocritical, but it's also, it does, I don't want to diagnose anybody psychologically myself, but
I'm happy to when it comes to Trump because he's so obvious, so yes, I'm psychologizing because his psychology, he wears it on his sleeve. It comes across in everything that he says. He's made it such a big part of his, it's out there. To not psychologize Donald Trump is to miss who Donald Trump is. There's no content to discuss. There's no ideas there. There is his personality, his psychology, his weaknesses, his strengths. That's it. This is about Donald Trump. It's not about a set of ideas that we should challenge. And what people like about Donald Trump is not his ideas, because he has none. And I think people know that. What people like about him is, again, it's his personality. It's his psychology. It's partially that he says whatever comes into his mind, that he's willing to lie and bullshit his way out and into things. And I think people like that, because what people don't like is the politicians who lie and disguise it and manipulate. With Trump, it's blatant. It's out there. So at least when he lies, he's lying. There's no hiding the fact. And anybody who denies Trump is a liar is basically, denying reality. This is not something that needs a lot of proof from day one.
Well, right. But is it maybe just the pragmatism, right? So the pragmatist will say the true is what works. Now we have a different standard of what true is. And so we call him a liar, and he's just saying whatever works.
Yes. But again, he's not that's absolutely right. But he's not a pragmatist philosophically. I don't think he thinks that way. He just doesn't care. Okay. All right, we've got a super chat question. Will Trump have any real competition in the 2020 election, either on the right or left? I doubt he'll have any competition on the right. I don't see any Republicans with the guts to actually challenge Donald Trump. I wish there was. And maybe you'll get somebody like Kasich, which will be pretty pathetic, because Kasich is pretty pathetic. But I don't see anybody on the free market right challenging him. I wish they were. I mean, Ben Shapiro has once in a while said he would do it, and that would be fun. That would be fun to see. As critical as I might be of Ben, yeah, that would be fun. And on the left, wow. I mean, the fact is that the Democratic Party seems to be committed to moving dramatically to the left.
That socialist they're talking about, right?
Well, she's a House member, so social democrat. Let's be fair.
Okay. Sorry.
Not a socialist. She's a social democrat, Ocasio-Cortez, but she's not running for president. She'll probably get into the House because she's a Democrat in a very democratic. But it might be but everybody's running to the left. So Elizabeth Warren is talking about running. Kamala Harris from California, who hasn't been as wacky left as some people have been, but is moving more to the left. Gillibrand from New York has talked about running, and again, I think moving more and more to the left. Bernie Sanders is going to run again. So I think you're going to have a lot of people running to the left in the Democratic Party. So you're going to have much more ideological leftists. So, it's hard to tell who the Democrats will pick ultimately and who's going to run against Trump. It's going to be an awful, I don't think Oprah is going to run. I don't think Mark Cuban will run, although that would be fun to see Mark Cuban run. The other potential is that Bloomberg runs. Bloomberg, the former mayor of New York, runs. He's got the money. He could run as an independent. He could try to run as a Democrat. He could try to run as a Republican. I guess he's so middle of the road. He's nothing.
He's the soda guy, the soda band guy.
He's a soda band guy.
Yeah.
But Bloomberg could run. But whether Bloomberg has any traction outside of New York. I just don't think he does. He's not. It turns out that name recognition matters, and he has very little. So it's going to be interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Zuckerberg will run. No, I don't know.
I have a strong suspicion that Trump could win again, could get reelected, because I just don't see anybody with any kind of credibility to who's going to run against him. And the Democratic Party is moving so far to the left that even though I think they have an opportunity to defeat Trump, and if they ran a decent candidate, they would defeat Trump, they're not going to, because they're going to run some crazy leftist out there. So we'll see. It's going to be interesting. I think the midterms now are going to be interesting, and then what happens in the 2020 election is going to be fascinating.
Yeah. So, gosh, that's depressing, but 2020 is still far off. So maybe we can hope for something better to come up, because everything
maybe
you said sounds kind of
so somebody's saying, it's incorrect to say Trump has no ideas. He just doesn't have an integrated system of thought. No, nobody has an integrated system of thought. I don't know any politician with an integrated system of thought. No, Trump has no ideas. He is put the finger in the wind and see what sticks. And he used to be a Democrat. He's a Republican now. He used to be pro-abortion. Now he's anti-abortion. He, the one thing he's always been, I'll say, is anti-trade. But that's because I think he's very provincial and concrete bound. But no, he's anti-intellectual. He's anti-ideas. He's anti-ideology. Of course, he's not a philosopher. No politician's a philosopher. But even to compare him with Ted Cruz, you could say, has ideas. I disagree with many of them based on religion. It's a false integrated system, and they're not fully integrated. There's lots of contradictions within Ted Cruz, or even somebody like what's his name from Florida?
Rubio. You really liked him. Yeah.
I didn't really like him. I didn't really like anybody. I never really like anybody.
Okay. But relatively speaking.
Like somebody like Rubio, who had some ideas, but, certainly no integrated system of thought, no philosophy, no guiding principles. He's a milder form of pragmatism, and some decent ideas. No, there's a fundamental difference between... Somebody just said I'm autistic. That's a new one. There's a fundamental difference between Donald Trump and all these others in the fact that Donald Trump despises ideas. He despises any systematic view of the world. He despises
what you're describing just sounds so much like pragmatism to me. Now, granted, he could not be an explicitly theoretical, committed pragmatist, but everything that you're telling me just checks off all the boxes for pragmatism.
He is an absolute pragmatist. He's the most pragmatist president ever. And you remember Ayn Rand argued quite vehemently and quite objectively that JFK, John F. Kennedy, was the most anti-intellectual pragmatist president we ever had. And she thought JFK was horrific. I mean, and I think she was right, but she couldn't even imagine a Donald Trump. Donald Trump makes JFK look principled, look like he has ideas, look intellectual.
But Yaron, I've been told so many times that I'm an idiot for not recognizing that Rand would have been in support of Trump were she alive today. And I'm just too stupid to see that. You understand?
Yeah, no, I know.
Okay.
I know.
Okay. So I gave you guys already in his criticism of the Koch brothers, we have seen that he's saying you shouldn't be concerned about whether you're fair to other human beings. Why? Because those other human beings happen to be born elsewhere. Somehow that is consistent with, it's necessary to put America first, to be totally unconcerned. I think it's ridiculous to be concerned with fairness to foreigners. He has thrown away this idea of taxation as theft. It's lower taxes are good only if they're a gift from him. If you're a businessman and you're actually trying to structure your business and locate your business so as to avoid paying taxes in the United States, you are a bad person. according to Trump, in these tweets of these criticisms of the Koch brothers, who are good guys. He's not for free trade. He says explicitly he's for powerful trade. Trump supporters, he's done all this week.
Well, he says whatever he feels like, right? So sometimes he'll say free trade and then they'll contradict you. So it's meaningless what he says. Look at his actions. His actions suggest that he is a crony. I call him, what do you call it? Central planner in chief. He is an anti-free trade. He's raised tariffs. He's used national security claims to manipulate trade. He wants the Federal Reserve to keep interest rates low so that the dollar would come down. He is a currency manipulator, what he accuses China of doing. He is the antithesis of a capitalist. He is not a capitalist. So people are saying, why are you going after? He's a capitalist. No, he's anti-capitalist. Put aside, he might have been a decent businessman, but he is not a capitalist. Somebody says I'm sounding like a Democrat. Sure, I often sound like a Democrat. I'm pro-abortion, not pro-choice. I'm pro-abortion. I am pro-choice and pro-life, but pro-abortion. I am pro-gay marriage. I am pro-immigration. I'm pro-free speech, which, I don't know if that's a Democrat or Republican thing. I'm pro the press. I'm pro freedom of the press. Definitely pro freedom of the press. So if those things make me sound like a Democrat, I don't care, because I'm not a Democrat. I'm not a Republican. I don't support Donald Trump. I don't support Hillary Clinton. I don't support anybody in politics today. I'm an objectivist, and objectivists don't sound like Republicans. Objectivists don't sound like conservatives. Objectivists don't sound like Donald Trump. Mm-hmm. Objectivists don't sound like the right. They don't sound like the left. I'm something completely different. The fact that somebody is a billionaire businessman doesn't, stay a billionaire businessman. I'll defend your right to do business, but doesn't make you a good politician. The fact that you can, even if you are a really, really good businessman, everybody says Donald Trump's great because he made billions. Okay, Zuckerberg, who actually just lost, $18 billion in one day or something, more money than Donald Trump ever made in his entire career. Zuckerberg lost in one day. So if Zuckerberg were president, a leftist, would you say, well, he's a capitalist? How can you go after Zuckerberg? Or if Bill Gates became president, the second richest man in the world, or what's his? Well,
Bezos.
Bezos is probably a free market guy. Bezos is probably more of a libertarian than anything else. But take Bill Gates, who we know is somewhat on the left. If he became president somehow, would you say, well, I can't criticize him because he's a capitalist, and he's made like what Donald Trump has made is pocket change for Bill Gates. So if you're measuring based on how much money you make, then Bill Gates is like the greatest capitalist ever. And
what about Tim Cook from Apple too? Come on.
Tim Cook. Yeah, let's go for any of these businessmen. They're all leftists.
They're doing really well.
If
Apple
president, would you say I can't criticize them because they were businessmen one day? No, Donald Trump is a leftist when it comes to economics. Donald Trump is when it comes to economics, he's a nationalistic socialist. He's a national socialist when it comes to economics. He's about, and he talks about create 500,000 manufactured jobs created since I won the election. His number to begin with, but he's about American manufacturing, not about the rise in productivity in America, which is very low even with Donald Trump as president. Not the rise in quality of life or standard of living, or the real long-term economic success of the United States, which is very dubious. But he's created American jobs. Who the hell cares about American jobs? Have you increased freedom in America? Have you increased economic freedom? And some he has by lowering regulations and by reducing the regulatory burden, and some he has by reducing corporate taxes. But on a lot of things, like tariffs, like increasing certain regulations, like trying to manipulate businesses into what they should and shouldn't do and who they should and shouldn't hire and where they should and shouldn't locate their plants, he is no friend of the free market, no friend of capitalism.
Well, and a good question to ask along those lines is, what do each of those 500,000 manufacturing jobs actually cost in terms of the displacement in the economy that he's had to force to happen in order for those 500,000 manufacturing jobs? But this goes on to my next commentary on Trump this week, right? Because he started out early this week retweeting.
At some point, we've got two super chat questions that I have to get to.
Are they related to this trade issue?
So keep going.
Okay. So this Ronna McDaniel GOP chairwoman. She tweeted this thing out and he retweeted it earlier in the week. And this is what got me thinking along the next lines, the lines of this little cartoon that I made. She's quoting it from, I guess, the article. David Burritt, U.S. Steel's president and CEO, said the company was experiencing a renaissance and credited Donald Trump's actions for the steel industry's revival. This has been a huge topic this week. Everyone's so excited because U.S. Steel has been revived. There's a renaissance in the steel industry. And what this brought to mind for me, and you tell me what you think of it. I've decided that Trump's economy that's created this way, right, where he's reviving these businesses that if the market had been left free, the people who had worked for those industries, they would have had to, learn some new skills, retool, go and work in a different industry somewhere, right? Productively, they'd be able to do other things. But instead, he insists on reviving these industries that were inefficient, that couldn't do it without his help.
Yeah.
And so what I'm calling it is the zombie economy.
Yeah.
In the sense of bringing back to life these factories that were dead.
Yeah.
So you've got, and moreover, of course, zombies, they have, I don't even watch zombie movies. I hate those kind of movies. I've never watched a zombie, but I've seen, a little bit of clips, and people were answering me this week with some funny little clips about zombies, going after and killing other people. So I've got, if you go to my blog, don'tletitgo.com, if you follow me on social media, you've already seen it. Few people thought it was as funny as I did. I had a great time. It took me a while. My Photoshop skills are terrible, but I've got this zombie on a Harley Davidson motorcycle, stuck the logo on there, and that's zombie,
what that is. It took me a while to figure that out. Okay.
Yeah. Right. So the zombie, remember Harley wanted to move a factory outside of the United States because of Trump's tariffs, right? So Trump's tariffs, what are they doing? They're reviving these factories that probably should have been out of business, and the people should have gone on to use their skills in more productive ways. And instead, you've got this zombie economy where these people are back. There's the revival, there's the so-called renaissance, and they're driving Harley Davidson out of the country. This is what Trump's economic revival actually is.
I think that's absolutely right. I think it's a good description, because while he's done some good things, and those of you claim I never say anything nice about Donald Trump, while he's done some good things, some regulations are being lowered, particularly at the FDA and some other places. He's appointed some better judges to federal courts, and with at least with Gorsuch to the Supreme Court, and judges that are going to be more pro, at least property rights. On other issues, they might not be so good, but at least on property rights, these judges are going to be good. He's basically outsourced the choice of judges to the Federalist Society, and that's generally a good thing. Yeah. Not always a good thing, but generally a good thing. But so while he's done that, and he's deregulated, and he has lowered corporate taxes, at the same time, federal spending is out of control. I was just reading in the Wall Street Journal yesterday, and I know you'll probably say this is fake news, but government borrowing is going completely unexpectedly rising dramatically. Shouldn't be unexpected because spending is so out of control. So the gap between income and spending is growing, and the Treasury Department has had to add additional auctions to auction off federal bonds in order to raise money, which means that we better be nice to Chinese, because somebody's going to have to buy all this debt that we're issuing. And so the deficit, the real deficit that actually matters, the deficit of spending versus revenue, is exploding under Donald Trump and is growing dramatically. And again, that supports your thesis of a zombie economy. Yes, short-term economic growth is going up at the expense of long-term economic growth, because that long-term economic growth is going to get crushed because of government borrowing and because of massive deficits, which Trump has signed off on. Much more important,
plus these
willing
tariffs.
to shut down the government to build a wall, which is insignificant, because the number of illegal immigrants coming in is an insignificant number relative to everything else. But he's not willing to shut down government in order to force Congress to actually cut spending. That he's not willing to shut that, and that's important. And that's important long term, because again, pragmatists, as you would say, right? Don't think long-term. Everything is short-term. Everything is about getting votes and about getting his base excited. And what gets his base excited is the wall. What gets his base excited is demonizing illegal immigration. What gets his base excited is American jobs and the steel industry. But it's a real
U.S. steel.
There's a real
America first
zombie economy out there. I mean, if we project just a few years out, you would have to increase taxes or reduce spending by about $2,200 per taxpayer, for every taxpayer, just to keep the debt to GDP ratio from staying the same. It's way too high already. It's crippling our economy already. But every single American alive would have to pay to the government an additional $2,200 just to keep it the same, not to reduce it, just to keep the debt to GDP ratio the same. You know, and it's probably worse because that predates the tax cuts and the increase in revenue under this Republican Congress. You know, we've got entitlements that are going to bankrupt this country. Forget illegal immigration a minute. What's really going to kill this country? What's really going to turn this country's economy upside down? What's really going to hamper growth is entitlements. And by the way, immigration would help because you'd bring in workers of working age. If you bring in young people, then at least they could pay taxes to fund the entitlement. So if you were thinking long-term, maybe you'd be pro-immigration if you cared about entitlements. But no, nobody's reforming entitlements. Nobody's thinking about reforming entitlements. So, you know, you're talking about...
He's thinking about elections. That's all really...
So nobody's doing Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security, which are going to bankrupt this country. Nothing else matters. If you look at government spending, nothing else matters. So the only way to keep spending on Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security at current levels and current projections is to dramatically cut defense spending. So yes, in the short term, Donald Trump has increased defense spending, but because he's not willing to tackle the real issues, then he's not cutting. Then what he's doing is sacrificing long-term defense spending. So long-term, the United States is going to become a smaller and smaller and smaller military power because we have decided that the most important thing for us to do is to fund Medicare and Social Security for old people.
Well, and he wants to fund the wall out of the military budget. He said that some time ago anyway, that he was musing in a tweet about whether it would be okay to
I think the military budget's too big anyway. But for those conservatives out there who care about the military budget, if you really cared about the military budget, what you would be pushing for is a reduction of spending on other things. Because if you project into the future, you just can't continue to spend at these levels. It is insanity to continue to spend this kind of money on entitlements, on everything else, and pretend that you will still have money for a military budget into the future. It just is not going to happen. But again, nobody who supports Trump, and certainly Trump, nobody who adamantly supports Trump, they don't think about the future. The future is not interesting to them. It's right now. It's the pure pragmatism. What is going to make a difference right now? Long-term makes no impact on them.
It's just about getting through the next election and making sure that your side still wins, as far as I can tell. And this is where we go into the next, kind of.
And by the way, if you want to understand the future, just run the numbers. I mean, this is math. This is simple math. Social Security and Medicare will consume every dollar of revenue by something like 2025, between 2025 and 2030. Every single dollar of revenue will be consumed by Medicare and Social Security. So it's not me projecting about the future, some hypotheticals. These are the numbers. This is how it adds up. So even if the economy grew at 3% a year, which it is not, the other thing I will tell you now about this economy is it will not continue to grow as fast as it did in the last quarter. I will guarantee that. We are heading towards lower economic growth, not higher economic growth. These tariffs are going to cost us growth. The fact that government spending is out of control is going to cost us economic growth. The fact that the president is so unnerving businessmen with stuff like him attacking the Koch brothers is going to slow economic growth. Economic growth is going to slow. And then the question is, what are some of you going to say? Are you going to say, yeah, okay, Donald Trump screwed up, sorry. Or you're going to blame the slowdown in economic growth on 1,000 other things and defend everything Donald Trump.
Or it would have been worse under Hillary.
Yes.
It would have been worse under Hillary.
Defend Trump no matter what. What's that?
I was going to say, they'll say it would have been worse under Hillary. That's, yeah.
I mean, as if that's relevant, given that Hillary is not president.
Can I ask you a political question? I am not up on, pure politics. Was Pennsylvania a swing state?
Yeah.
Okay. So here he is on Twitter, right? I had suspected that, but I hadn't remembered for sure. Talking about Pennsylvania, they just happen to have some sort of an election running for Senate in Pennsylvania this week. Lou Barletta, and I guess he won. Is that right? Lou Barletta won in Pennsylvania this week.
I wasn't following politics.
Yeah, but you start to see what this is all about, right? He revived U.S. Steel in Pennsylvania, and he puts this tweet out there after he, touts that he's done this and everything. He says, Pennsylvania has to love Trump because unlike all of the others before me, I am bringing back steel in a very big way. A lot of all caps in there. He says, plants opening up in Pennsylvania. And then I guess he probably inserted this later as an afterthought. Pennsylvania, and he says, and all over the country. And he says, and Congressman Lou Barletta, who is running for Senate in Pennsylvania, is really helping. So he's calling in a favor, people. He's saying, look what I've done for you. I've revived the steel industry in your state. And I really want you to vote for this Lou Barletta, who's running for the Senate to help him out. And, it's all go back to William James, right? Again, I had to dig into James. It's like, what is the good for a pragmatist? What's good? The statement that you get from James is that the good is satisfying demand.
Yep.
Any demand under the sun, you satisfy. He's like, look, I've satisfied your demand. Pennsylvanians, you wanted me to bring steel back because you were upset because your jobs are being lost. I've brought it back in a very big way. I'd like you to vote for my guy.
But he's satisfying a particular demand, and the demand he's satisfying really is getting elected. It's satisfying his base and working on what is good for the base. Again, there's nothing here about what is good for America. He's not satisfying all Americans' demands. He's satisfying particular demands. The steel industry, not the motorcycle industry. The steel industry, not even the auto industry, but the auto industry is complaining. So what he wants to do is tariffs on autos to protect the American auto industry. Again, he's a central planner. Now, look, I'll say this again. I say this all the time, but I'll say this again. My standard is not what an objectivist president would do. My standard is what anybody who cares about America's future will do. If you're not willing to engage in a discussion about reforming entitlements, Democrat, Republican, I don't care who the president is, I'm going to criticize you. If you continue to spend like crazy, I am going to criticize you. If you are going to ridicule American businessmen, I am going to criticize you. If you are going to favor one industry over the other industry, I am going to criticize you. Not even from the perspective of pure laissez-faire. If we're going to pure laissez-faire, then yeah, everything should be dismantled. But this is simple stuff. This isn't, and yes, somebody should be speaking up for pure laissez-faire, which is, what we try to do.
Well, and again, the reason it's so essential to do this is because he says he's for America first. He's for making America great again. And what we're pointing out is that the ideas that he is animated by, well, again, ideas, who knows, but the policies that he's choosing to implement are based on very anti-American ideas. He doesn't embrace ideas per se, but there you go. That article that he retweeted, right, in this woman's tweet, the GOP chairwoman's tweet, the article was from the Daily Herald. Trump hails Illinois steel mill as an economic success story. I was almost tempted to tweet about that himself because he's retweeting a tweet that has a story about him tweeting. And, you can go like it's those pictures, where somebody's got a mirror forever, it's
saying he's a narcissist is psychologizing.
Well, no, but it's, like the endless string of news about he's tweeting about news about his tweets, about news about his tweets or whatever. But in that article, if you read it towards the end, it talks about the nail industry. There was some nail manufacturer, I can't remember now, it's been days since I read the article, but this nail manufacturer is being put out of business because of the very same tariffs that are, helping out U.S. Steel and reviving the steel industry. So again, it was reading that article that made me think of this idea of the zombie economy. Of course, contrasting U.S. Steel with Harley makes for a much better graphic than U.S. Steel versus a nail manufacturer. But that's the point. In order to revive these, he is having to put other people out of business. And that's the part that you're not seeing very much. The headlines are all about the revival.
Absolutely. And that's a zombie part. And that long term is going to have profound consequences on the U.S. economy. Short term, yes, you can focus on all the jobs so-called created. Long term, once you have a slowdown or a recession, you will see the consequences of the zombies only become real during slowdowns or during recessions. And then you start seeing how much of the economy is a zombie bubble, artificial economy. And you will see that in the next turndown. And I mean, Greg points out on Facebook, and this is absolutely true. It's, what Donald Trump has done to the Republican Party is he's taken the whole issue of entitlement reform off the table. Nobody in the Republican Party is talking about this. And that's true of free trade. That's true of which the Republicans used to stand for, and they don't anymore. The Congress just passed something that is very supportive of him going after China. They don't like him going after Europe, but they like him going after China. So he has changed the whole focus of the Republican Party away from free markets. So the Republican Party was never free market, but they were leaning in the direction of free markets, right? Mm-hmm. And they've taken that leaning away. So Donald Trump is, and this is why I criticize him so much. This is why, in some senses, I criticize him more than I would criticize a Democrat, because because you guys who support Trump keep saying he's a capitalist, keep saying he's for free trade, keep saying he's really a free marketer, keep saying he's the ideal, and it keeps saying he's an Ayn Rand hero. I've seen people claim he's John Galt, right? Yes. So that is, you're forcing me by doing that to say, no, he is horrific. He is awful, which he is. But I have to do it even more than usual because it's important for us true capitalists. It's important for those of us who actually believe in freedom, who actually believe in America, in what America stands for, in the ideals of America. It's important for us to stand up and say, this guy does not represent America. This guy is not a make America great again. He is a make the anti-America great again. And you have to attack. If you believe in capitalism, you must attack Trump. You must distance yourself from Trump as much as possible.
Otherwise, how do you expect to be taken seriously by those who are the better ones?
Better than Hillary. Even if you voted for him because he's better than Hillary, say he's better than Hillary, but he's no capitalist. Say he's better than Hillary, but all these bad things that he's done. That would be objective. You guys, so many people out there have become so non-objective. So you have to attack Trump. And by the way, those of you claiming I left the United States of America, you should study geography. But last I saw, I am still still live in America and still have an American passport. Puerto Rico is part of America.
Yes, definitely. For those who are interested, you can check out the latest tit for tat in the trade war that's easy to win. China threatens new tariffs on $60 billion worth of U.S. goods. But I would, if you're okay, Yaron, go on to the next topic.
Trump has to have some 200 billion, so he's bigger than China.
Yeah.
That's because we import more goods than they import. So we can put on tariffs more than they can. But who gets hurt by the tariffs? We do.
Yeah, we've all been conscripted in the trade war. And I, for one, I haven't signed up to actually serve in a war, but.
Yeah, and as I said before, it's not going to affect imports and exports that much because of the changes in the value of the dollar. But that's a whole other story.
Yeah. So let's go on to free speech, if we could, please. This is a week.
Are we going to do Donald Trump with free speech and then move to Tommy?
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. This week we have something that I think might be unprecedented. We have our president via his press secretary endorsing, I guess, an offhanded statement by the president, that the press is the enemy of the people. We had Sarah Huckabee Sanders refusing to disavow that statement on Trump's behalf during a press conference exchange with Acosta. Is he from CBS? I can't remember. CNN, Acosta. In any event, I watched it, and she had the opportunity. She maybe in her own mind, from what you could read from her, she might say, well, she herself wouldn't go so far as to say the press is the enemy of people. She did talk about bad things that have happened to her because of the negative press coverage that she personally has received. There's just a lot of vicious stuff going out there on both sides, really. But my point here is that our president is not helping, whatever the vitriol is in the discussion. Sometimes there's incitement to violence on certain sides of this debate, but our president is not helping by saying that the press is the enemy of the people. If there are people who thought that the press was bad and the press was anti-Trump, it's not helping it.
I mean, first, it's not helping. He's fueling the fire and has been fueling the fire and has been doing it for 2 years.
Yeah.
I don't think this is any different than what the press as the enemy of the people has been his view since the campaign. It was Bannon's view. By the way, Bannon has come out and did an interview supporting Trump's position on the Koch brothers. So there's an article, I think, Politico about that. But I mean, Trump has been doing this, talking about this with vis-a-vis the press since the beginning of the campaign. He has positioned the press as the enemy, as un-American, as the enemy of the people, the enemy of America. It's horrific what he's done to the press. You can criticize the mainstream media all you want, but the press,
yeah,
not any particular press, the press is the enemy of the people. He praises certain press outlets like Fox, which is just as non-objective as CNN is. So he prefers some press to other press. He emphasizes that. He talks about constantly. Now, granted, Obama started this by going after Fox but nowhere near as much as Donald Trump has done. Trump has taken it to a new level. As far as I know, there's never been a president who has been as antagonistic to the press, even acknowledge that most of the press is leftist. That is no justification for the president of the United States, the president who holds a gun in his hand, to basically endorse some press outlets and reject other press outlets, to completely present the only source of news that we have, whether you like it or not. All the news that you're getting from CNN, from Fox, from the New York Times, because they're the only people who have money to send reporters
Washington
out.
Post,
everything else you get is people interpreting stuff produced by journalists who are working for the so-called mainstream media. That's the source of our press. Now, they're all biased. I know they're biased. I've been talking about their bias for 20 years, and many of them are ignorant, and many of them are stupid. And clearly they've got a leftist bias.
Some of them are racist. New York Times just hired a racist, as far as I can tell.
Yeah. All right.
Yeah. So, okay, criticize that.
Yeah, criticize that. But it's not the president's job to criticize him. It's not the president's job. Just like it's not the president's job to decide which industry should thrive and which industry should sink. It's not the president's job to decide which news outlet should be successful, which outlet should not. It's not the president's job to outline what is real news and what is fake news. It's not the president's job to outline what is truth and what is false. The president's job should be to protect the individual rights of Americans. And that's it, right? And it's not to have an opinion about the press. It's not to endorse Rush Limbaugh or Fox News as if they're not biased. Rush Limbaugh is one of the most biased people I know, and certainly Fox News is. Mm-hmm. And yet, this is what we're getting: a president who has no respect for America, has no respect for the First Amendment, has no respect for the press, has no respect for the idea of journalism, and is eager to attack. He's lived for Putin. Putin murders them. Trump hasn't quite gotten to the point where he can do that, so he goes after Fox.
But he lets hang out there this idea that the press is the enemy of the people, and this is a climate in which journalists are now starting to increasingly get threats from Trump supporters. So thanks to Greg, I've got this article in the program notes. Trump will have blood on his hands, and it's by Brett Stevens. And he talks about that he has personally received a bunch of death threats from supporters, and he's more conservative, as I understand. I'm not really familiar with him.
No, Brett Stevens is a Republican. Was a Republican and a conservative, and he's a never Trumper.
Yeah, and so he's the type who's getting threats. I get just sort of implicit ideas of people on Twitter will just say basically that somehow I'll have it coming to me if all the criminals that are coming across the border end up getting me too. That's the kind of junk that I get, but it's vicious. It is vicious. And it is really irresponsible for a president in this type of environment. You say, okay, well, Antifa, and there's people who go after Trump supporters and they commit acts of violence against Trump supporters. And there's leftists who incite that. And there's some people maybe who are journalists who, egg this on and everything else, right? The answer, if we want to be pro-American, the answer is not to say the press is the enemy of the people because the press happens to be dominated by liberals. The answer is to disavow all acts of violence, all initiation of force.
Well, and to disavow falsehoods. So the answer would be, if you were the president and there was an article that said something false, is to say, this was false. Here's the truth. Here are the facts. Here I'm presenting you with the facts. So do that without having to condemn the entire New York Times, without having to condemn all of the press. Focus on the facts. The problem is that, he is a purveyor of fake news. Donald Trump is, as I've said many times, is a liar. That's his modus operandi. And it's funny to hear somebody who is a liar accuse the New York Times and accuse these other places of lying. Now they do, but you're doing the same thing. Right. It's funny to say that Fox is objective, but CNN is distorted when Fox does exactly the same as CNN does. It just does it from the angle you happen to agree with, but it's not about facts. But it's also funny to read on YouTube chat people who say you can't listen to Yaron anymore. It's inaudible. It's this anti-Trump stuff, and yet here they are listening to Yaron in spite of that.
Well, I mean,
another lie by Yaron. So far, Yaron is number one objectivist liar in history. So you're off the hook, Amy. I'm number one. You may be number 2 or 3. I don't know.
Darn, I'm gonna have to up my game.
Can we talk about Iran?
Yes, please,
Iran
please.
North Korea, just a little bit, and then we'll do Tommy quickly.
Yeah, the Tommy is not too long. I just think it's something important to say something about that.
Didn't Donald Trump this week, and I'm wondering how you guys are going to spin this. Some of you are going to spin this. Didn't Donald Trump this week propose meeting with the leaders of Iran, Khamenei, leaders of Iran, with no preconditions, having a meeting with the Iranian regime? Now, the Iranian regime is not on the verge of a nuclear war with the United States, so it's not like the only option is to meet them or to have a war with them. I'm curious what people think of that, how they could justify that. The week before that, everybody was praising, a lot of the people on Facebook and stuff were praising because Donald Trump went after the Iranians and said, really, I'm going to go after you. I'm going to get you guys. And everybody said, yes, finally somebody's being tough with the Iranians. And then this week he said that he would meet with the leadership of Iran. So is that a contradiction? Is that, but is that all a good thing? So it truly is fascinating. Donald Trump believes he should meet with everybody, even as the North Koreans are doing the opposite of what they promised him to do. The latest intelligence shows.
But Yaron, they're writing him a nice letter. He got a great letter from them.
Yeah, but at the same time, they're upgrading the uranium enrichment site.
Yes.
They've also appeared to be building a new ballistic missiles based on spy satellite stuff. And according to the UN, not exactly a particularly rigorous organization when it comes to these things, they're continuing its nuclear and missile programs, and they've increased illegal ship-to-ship transfers of all products, and they're continuing to try to sell weapons abroad. So nothing has really changed in the North Korea behavior other than the one plant that was the dismantling because they're moving everything to a different plant. So, wow.
Well, and
it's 4D chess. Sorry, 4D chess. I missed a few dimensions. I'm still on the 1D. I'm still on the 2D chess, and I'm missing it.
Well, now we've got an extra layer in the chess kind of locution, if we're going to call it that, the locution. I've got this meme in the program notes. You could check it out, calling it 3-knee chess now, 3-knee chess, in the sense of, Trump has criticized the NFL players by saying that they are disrespectful to America by taking a knee during a football game. And for people like me, I think that it's more disrespectful to United States when our president goes around praising and meeting with these horrible, thuggish, violent dictators.
Yep.
And, it's only adding insult to injury to find out that absolutely nothing is being gained by doing this. But what a horrible spectacle to watch the president of the United States meet with these disgusting, thuggish dictators. Back on July 23rd, my friend Benjamin, he predicted that Trump was going to meet with Rouhani next. And sure enough, this week we had the statement from Trump saying he would meet the Iranian leaders, quote, anytime with no preconditions.
Rouhani will meet with him.
3D chess, we're calling it now.
Yeah. No, it's horrific. And again, I would suggest just imagine Hillary Clinton suggesting a meeting with Rouhani and what you guys would do. Imagine Obama, who never met with the Iranians or the North Koreans, doing that, what you guys' response would do. But because it's Trump, it's 4D chess, and you will forgive, there were not, a lot of you who will forgive anything to him. But he is, a pragmatist. It's all about today, tomorrow. There are no long-term consequences taken in. And it's all about his image. It's not about reality. There's nothing here about the reality of what these kind of meetings actually achieve, because they achieve everything good for the dictator and nothing good for the free country. And long-term, they are absolutely unmitigated disaster. All right. I have 2 questions from the super chat that we should do before we do Tommy.
Sure.
Otherwise I'll forget.
Okay.
So one is, what did I think of Peter Schiff? And there was a second part of it, but I've lost it. Yeah. This is what I was afraid of. You lose a certain segment of the chat.
Oh gosh. Sorry.
I like Peter. Peter's, we're friendly. I've spent some time with Peter Schiff. He's a nice guy. He's not an objectivist. He wouldn't consider himself an objectivist. He's not philosophical. He is not. He's not I think he's a fan. He's a fan of Ayn Rand's, but he's not an objectivist. But he's a good guy. I like him. I've often seen him speak. I agree with much of what he says. He's definitely a free market guy. He definitely believes in the free market. I agree with much of his criticism of Bitcoin and his defense of kind of a gold-based currency. I think some of his articles and books on economics are really good. He talks in simplified, simple language for people, which is really good. I also think that his predictions on finance have been very mediocre. Yes, he predicted the financial crisis in 2008, but that's because he was predicting financial crisis pretty much every year for like 15 years, and he got it right in the end. And then I was on television a lot with him in 2008 and 2009, and he would say things like gold is going to 10,000 and inflation is that. None of that happened. He also claimed that there was a delinking of the U.S. from the Chinese economy, and that has not happened and won't happen anytime soon. So I think that Peter is good on a lot of things, and I like him, but I wouldn't take investment advice from Peter Schiff. I wouldn't take investment advice from Peter Schiff. I'm not saying you should take investment advice from me either. I just wouldn't from Peter. He presents himself as an investment advisor. I do not. He's been on Joe Rogan, so I'm jealous of Peter. He has a much bigger following on his podcast and a much bigger following on his, I think the stuff that he does. So I'm a little jealous of Peter, but I want to go on Joe Rogan too. But Joe, so far has not had me on. Second question. This is an interesting question and important about what we said before on Tom Hartman. So this is a question about Tom Hartman, who's a real nasty leftist. And the questioner says, Tom Hartman keeps saying Ayn Rand is on the right. Why does he do that? What about all these issues in which Ayn Rand agrees with the left on, like abortion and so on? Why do they ignore that? Well, they ignore that exactly for the reason is they want to smear Ayn Rand. They want to smear Ayn Rand by associating her with Donald Trump and the religious right and the rest of the right. And they said they never mentioned she was an atheist. They never mentioned her position about other stuff, about other stuff that he did.
Right now, I almost feel like we've got more in common with the left than the right.
Well, on some issues, certainly. I don't have in common with anybody. So
yeah,
I don't think we really, I think now is the time to emphasize how different we are. So they don't have an interest in showing the similarities. They have an interest in smearing her. And again, I go back to what I said earlier. One of the reasons that I so emphasize how much I despise Donald Trump and how much I despise the modern right is to differentiate Ayn Rand from them. Ayn Rand is no fan. Ayn Rand's ideas are not compatible with Donald Trump. They're not compatible with Ted Cruz. They're not compatible with the Republican Party. They're not compatible with the left. They're not compatible with either one. And you have to be careful about saying we're more in common with the left. Which left? The left of Steven Pinker or the left of Elizabeth Warren, right? And so it's
right.
And both parties are moving to their more horrific manifestation. And we are different. We're in a third dimension. This is true 3D chess. We're not on the spectrum of left and right. We're individualists. Donald Trump is a collectivist. Elizabeth Warren is a collectivist. Donald Trump is a nationalist. Elizabeth Warren is a socialist. All evils. We are something completely different. Ayn Rand is something completely different. Ayn Rand is on a completely different dimension. She talks a different, her ideas are completely different. So the left doesn't want to point this out and the right doesn't want to point that out.
Yes.
Can you cite sources for continued North Korea activity? It's another super chat. I would just cite the.
There's an article. Let me get an article.
I mean, there are tons of articles, but they're not going to believe the articles. Just Google it. There's a ton of now, granted, it's all leaked information because it's all intelligence information. So nobody has the data, but it's supportive of everything that I know about negotiating with evil. Evil will cheat. The North Koreans are cheating. There's no question in my mind. The sources of it were in the press all over the place this last week, right? So just Google it. I was reading off of, I can't remember. I closed the window, so I'm not sure what news article. But it doesn't matter because every news outlet was carrying the same.
Okay, here's a Reuters one. There's a Reuters. If you go to Reuters.com, the headline is North Korea has not stopped nuclear missile program. Confidential. I love when they do this. It's confidential. Well, it's no longer confidential once they.
Yeah, so there's been a lot of leaks, plus the UN came out with the report. Now, not that I trust the UN, but the U.S. Atomic Commission has been pretty good on occasion on Iran and has been pretty good on North Korea. So, but yeah. I mean, I think both left and right are becoming inhospitable to human life, and they're both evil and disgusting, and they're anti-American, both. And I don't differentiate between the anti-Americanism of Donald Trump and the anti-Americanism of the left. I know you guys do, or a lot of you do, but I don't differentiate that. I'm looking for allies who are pro-America, who understand, at least at some level, the fundamental ideas on which America was founded. And today you cannot find them, certainly not among Trump supporters, and you cannot find them on the left. There are different. This is why I think there needs to be a third party in the United States. It needs to reject both the Democratic Party and the Republican Party, because both of them have become fundamentally antagonistic to the founding ideas of this country. And I'm not talking about the founding ideas of this country just as interpreted by an objectivist, but the founding principles of this country as understood by a lot of people as of, let's say, 50, 60, certainly 100 years ago. So it doesn't even have to be an objectivist perspective on it.
No, and from that perspective, I would say that Trump's even worse, because whereas Obama ran on hope and change, that he was going to fundamentally transform America into something basically it hadn't been before, that he thought was better. Trump ran on the promise of making America great again, supposedly going back to the foundation, when he's not doing anything of the kind. So in that sense, I think it's even more important to distance ourselves.
Yes, and Trump is no friend of capitalism. We
Yeah.
have to distance ourselves from Trump right now. That is the priority. And nobody has ever confused me with Elizabeth Warren. But people are confusing objectivism with Trump, and therefore we must do whatever we can to distance ourselves from this anti-capitalist, anti-American president. So, you know, that's the job which we take upon ourselves. All right, let's talk a little bit about
Tommy Robinson.
Who was, I'm glad to say, released from prison this week, and it sounds like, but take your spin on it, and then we'll go from there.
Well, so he's out on bail.
Yes.
And so
there's going to be a retrial. There's going to be
there's going to be a rehearing. And so what happened is that Robinson, you know, through his attorney, was trying to challenge both the Canterbury, you know, conviction. I don't know if you exactly call it a conviction, because part of the issue is whether it's a civil contempt versus criminal, et cetera. But, you know, the conviction at Canterbury, which was the earlier contempt that he committed, and then the one at Leeds, which was in May, the second one. And he was trying to challenge both of those. Both of those together, according to the Leeds judge, gave rise to a 13-month sentence in prison. And that's what he's challenging. So the Court of Appeal said they'd go ahead and they release him on bail. They upheld the Canterbury finding. We'll call it a finding. I don't know if I want to call it a conviction. You know, I'm certainly not into the technicalities of English law, but I read the entire Court of Appeal opinion. So they let him out. They said they're going to uphold that conviction from the Canterbury, and that was well over a year ago. There was a few different factors there. First of all, the challenge to it came over a year too late. He's supposed to appeal it within a certain length of time, and he was over a year late in challenging that particular one. Second, while there were some procedural errors by that judge, it turns out that Robinson's representation at that time, in the earlier Canterbury hearing, his representation then was complicit in those errors. There is an ethical duty on attorneys in the UK to, when they become aware of a procedural error that is going on in a proceeding that they're part of, they need to bring it to the attention of the judge. And apparently Robinson's attorney made a deliberate choice not to bring it to the attention of the judge so that they could challenge it later, which is yucky. And the Court of Appeal did not like that. Third, they said that in any event, Robinson was not really prejudiced by whatever procedural errors were going on, that he was well aware of what he was being accused of, et cetera, that would have come out if the proper procedure had been followed. So that was Canterbury. With respect to Leeds, the Court of Appeal found that it was a completely improper procedure. It was a summary procedure. It was too fast.
Yep.
So there was not a need for it to be quick. So while the Court of Appeal was sympathetic with the Leeds judge feeling like he had to hurry about it, they said that once they had removed that video of Robinson's from Facebook, once that prejudicial material was no longer out there, that the judge at Leeds should have adopted a, kind of a longer time frame to actually have the contempt hearing. And moreover, it would have been appropriate to refer it to the Attorney General. Apparently that's the proper procedure in a case like that if there's no exigency. And they were saying, we are sympathetic as to why you thought there was exigency, but really there wasn't. You shouldn't have done this quick summary proceeding whereby, the contempt, the acts which constituted the contempt occurred, and then 5 hours later he's going to jail for it. That shouldn't be the time frame. They also said that because of this sort of rushed proceeding, that it was unclear whether the judge, in finding as he did, was relying upon some statements of Robinson that actually were irrelevant to the underlying contempt charge. But at the same time, they did not dismiss the charges. They said there's going to be a rehearing. And moreover, you could tell from the Court of Appeal's opinion that they were sympathetic to the fact that there is actionable contempt in Robinson's actions. It's not like there was some trumped up charge and then there's nothing there. And, he's just a political prisoner and everything else. Everyone was saying, oh, he's been vindicated. This is a huge victory for freedom of speech and all this stuff. What Robinson was doing there was largely not freedom of speech. It was actionable contempt. The reason he's out on bail right now is because the improper procedure was followed. And of course, we want proper procedure to be done. We don't want the judge to be looking at things that he shouldn't be looking at when he's figuring out what sentence is appropriate, et cetera.
But I think it's important to ask the question, why was it done so quickly? What is the big threat that Tony Robinson represented, given that it was just contempt of court? I mean, there was no security issue. And the video was down. And I think there is a legitimate question to ask, why was he singled out? Why other people who do similar things not? And then why do they treat him so badly when he's in jail? Because it sounds like he was purposefully put in a jail with a large Muslim population in spite of the threats against his life, threats against his wife's life outside of jail. The people talking about throwing acid in her face. And yet, while I think, this is good that they let him out, because it really, the whole thing of, they grabbed him, and within hours he was already in jail. And it just seemed like, what threat does...
Okay. But what the Court of Appeal talked about is that they were aware that the judge was legitimately concerned that the proceedings against these these horrible scumbags who have done disgusting things to young girls in the UK, he was concerned that those proceedings, and not just the one there at Leeds, but there were these other connected proceedings that could have been prejudiced as well, concerned that there not be a mistrial in these other things. And that's why there's contempt laws. I mean, if you think about this, right?
But there's a way in which you do it. And again, why are they singling him out? Why does nobody care about the actual trials? Why do they get very little press? Why does nobody talk about what these Pakistanis have actually done? Why is the focus on this one guy who's actually spent a lot of time bringing this to the forefront? And, the horror of what has been going on in the UK for the last 20 years, where these gangs have been doing this, and where officials throughout the political world and the police world have ignored it. And that is the real story. Tony Robinson, so he did something wrong, right? 13 months in jail seems like a lot.
Actually, they're saying they made the point, right? Because I don't know how they calculate this stuff. They have some kind of voodoo calculations that judges do about how much time you've served. But they've calculated that he had served the equivalent of 4 months. Yep. And so he was saying, hey, haven't I served my time in effect? Shouldn't you just
might get more than that? I saw that.
And they're saying you might get more.
Yeah, but that's my point.
Up to 2 years for this. Yeah.
The proportion here are the gangs who are raping girls, who are just the most disgusting that you can imagine. And because they're Muslims, they're basically being shielded and protected from scrutiny. And people are not talking about it, and there's no
right. Okay, but think about this, right?
Here's a guy who, yes, he did something wrong and should follow the law. And if the law in England says he did something wrong, that he should serve whatever he needs to do. But all the focus is on him. That he gets all this coverage in the press, and people upset, and he's called these names, and he's a racist, and all this stuff. And maybe, and yet the real story, which is these gangs, nobody cares. That's what upsets me. I mean, I'm not justifying what Tommy Robinson did. If he violated the law, he should suffer the consequence of violating the law. And if he violated the law in a way he was doing it for civil disobedience, then say this is civil disobedience. But and I'm not sure the law is objective. We can, that's
okay, but think about this.
The law in England, and it's not super non-objective, right? It's not.
No, it's not. I put it in the same category as laws of evidence. Because I've been thinking about this. People have been, kind of pushing back and debating about this a bit this week. And we have laws of evidence that talk about what can and cannot be admitted in a courtroom.
Yeah.
And this I see as an extension of that. These sorts of laws are recognitions that human beings are fallible, and that when they are asked to make a judgment as jurors, for example, in a sensitive trial like this, that it is appropriate for a judge to talk about what can and cannot be admitted in the courtroom, and then what they're told by the judge. They're given instructions as to what they should consider and what weight they should give it and how and all this. And I mean, if you say, okay, well, really, we shouldn't give instructions and stuff, but if we accept that premise that human beings are fallible and that a proper justice system would recognize that fact and try to give guidance when jurors are being asked to make these decisions, I see proper contempt laws, and again, we could talk about but a lot of what Robinson did substantively, I think, was prejudicial. Apparently he was in a place where he could have confronted jurors at, where he was, because they were coming in and stuff. And he's tried actually to find, and actually encounter the jurors on the way. This is not good. But let's, step back from, are the concrete actions ones that, amount to contempt and everything. If you think about it at a cultural level, right? And the problem is, the huge problem is what you said it was, that they failed to go after these guys when they should have, right? This is long overdue that they went after these scumbag gangs. And why? Because I guess they didn't want to be called racist because they were Pakistani or whatever.
They were all Muslims. So all these gangs are from some other Muslim country. So
my question for you is, does it help the cause? And this question was suggested to me by my friend Benjamin, who put it very eloquently the other day. Does it help the cause if you go out there and in answer to that problem, you, in your challenge or in your activism, put an emphasis on the nationality and the race? Is that not, sort of like the reverse racism answer, affirmative action as an answer to racial discrimination or something? If the problem is that they wouldn't go after criminals because they didn't want to be seen as racist, is the answer to, go out there and emphasize the race of the defendants?
Well, no, and I'm not justifying everything that he's done, but the fact is that it is a cultural issue. It is defendants from certain parts of the world with certain views of women and in certain communities, and it is worthwhile knowing that, because then you can look and find them, particularly if they were not sought after because nobody wanted to make it a religious or racial issue. But absolutely, if you know that this is prevalent in the Pakistani community, then you become more sensitized to that. I mean, I'm all for racial profiling. I'm for it, and the police.
Well, profiling, but what do you want to do when you're out there doing advocacy? Do you want to let the implication be out there that you think all Pakistanis are going to do this, for example?
I agree that I agree with you completely that Tommy Robinson and a lot of the right overemphasize race and nationality because that's who they are. I mean, no question. I'm not justifying Tommy Robinson. I'm giving him credit for the fact that during a period of time when nobody wanted to talk about this stuff, he did. Yes. I'm also giving him credit for the fact that he at least will identify the culture as a part of this, where the media will not. And even now when the trials are going on, the fact is there's no coverage of these trials in British media. They're pretending this doesn't exist. So the fact that he's out there trying to emphasize that this thing is going on, that these things are horrific, is to his credit. Now, if he did it in a way that's contemptuous of the court, he should suffer the consequences of contempt of court. But then again, he should be treated like everybody else, equality before.
Right. And that's the one question that I think is hugely legitimate. And Greg raised it before, which is, to what extent is he being singled out? There are a lot of other people whose actions, concrete actions, were the same as his and who haven't been prosecuted in this way. If that is politically biased.
My sense is that, yes, he is being discriminated against, but I can't prove it right now. But from what I've heard from people in England, he is being discriminated against. There were other people at some of these things doing other things, and they're not being prosecuted. But also the way he's being treated in jail and given the threats on his life and everything else suggests that they don't like him. They've defined him as a racist, as a Nazi, a sympathizer, whatever, and they're treating him particularly badly. And that's wrong. No matter what your ideas are, there is, the rule of law, and you should take into account the fact that the Muslims hate him and they might try to kill him in considering what jail you put him in. And he's put in solitary confinement to protect him, but solitary confinement is pretty nasty. So I think there's bias. I also, as I said this before, I'm not a huge Tony Robinson fan because I think that there's too much emphasis on the fact that these are immigrants and the fact that they're Muslims and Pakistanis or whatever. But I do think those things need to be pointed out because I think they're important. This is a consequence of a particular culture.
There's a correct and incorrect way to point out the connection between the two, I think.
Yes, and whether he goes over the line or not, I'm not sure. But the problem is, and this is what you're countering is, and this is again goes back to Trump phenomena. When the mainstream goes so out of their way not to do it, what you're going to get is a backlash. And so I put the blame squarely on the media in the UK. If the media in the UK approached this objectively, rationally, then they wouldn't be this counter movement. But when it's the same as when the New York Times spends more stories on transgenderism or whatever than on the economic plight of the lower middle class in America, then the lower middle class is gonna turn against the New York Times. They're gonna turn because they don't get it. They don't, so there were issues like that when the media becomes so detached from the real life of people, when rape of little girls doesn't matter to them, but transgender rights matter to them, then real people are going to get really pissed off and something bad's going to happen as a consequence. So I think the media here is to blame to a large extent, and people who point this out, some of them are going to do it in ways that we don't agree with, but not everybody's going to agree with us. I'm much more sympathetic to Tony Robinson because of the state of the UK with regard to these issues than I would otherwise be. The fact is, and I can't imagine the evil that constitutes what these gangs are doing. It is just, to me, it's like, there's very little that's more evil than what they're
disgusting.
Doing. Yeah. And good for him for pointing them out. Bad for him for violating the law, because I think it makes his case less effective. And I think he's going to land up in jail because of it. And that doesn't help anybody. So find ways to point out the evil of what is going on, in a way that is a way that is respectful of the law, and without being a racist or without being mistaken.
And also not in a way that gives them any sort of credible argument that they've been subject to mistrial, right? If it took so long to get these guys
absolutely
brought to justice, the last thing you want to actually do is undermine the the objectivity of the proceeding in a way. Now, maybe he's concerned, right, that I guess all of these jurors are not going to give him a fair trial, but the way that he's going about, if that is a concern, that was just total speculation on my part. Why would you want to undermine a proceeding that is finally bringing these scumbags to justice? That was the question, and I've asked it before.
That's it. It's unfortunate. All right.
So can we end on this good note? Can I just recommend something to people that's nice?
Yep.
Or you've got a super chat, some question, or?
Well, I got somebody asked me if I answer super chat questions, but I'm looking for the super chat question I might have missed, and I can't find it. So if anybody out there asked a super chat question that I did not answer, please point it out, because I don't see it. I try to answer all the super chat questions. Sometimes there's so many of them it becomes difficult, but I don't see the super chat question I might have missed. Go ahead.
So I've got a couple examples. There's a little series that Anthony Bourdain did called Raw Craft, and you can watch it on YouTube, and I put 2 there. One of them is a tailor who makes suits by hand, learned from the old masters. He can only make, I think, 12 or 13 suits per year. That's the, thousands and thousands and thousands of stitches per suit and everything. It's amazing. very inspiring. And he, there's an inspiring quotation from him that I'll pull out there, which is, he says, when he makes a suit, he makes it for himself first, second, and third. That the kind of painstaking labor of making this suit just perfect. It's for himself first, second, and third. And then there's a chef, pastry chef, and he's got apparently a bakery, maybe in a bakery in a separate kitchen, I guess, in New York, 2 different locations in New York. I want to go taste this stuff. It looks amazing. But he talks about not letting the creation interfere with your creativity. That once he actually created something called the cronut, which is a really disgusting, very non-paleo pastry. It looks delicious. I mean, it just looks amazing, but it's definitely not paleo, full of yummy stuff. But he created this, and then he was saying, no, he's got more. He's not going to just ride on this one particular one. And I mean, the stuff is beautiful. You should watch this guy work. So.
All right, good.
Yeah.
Where do they find that? Say that again.
They find it at the bottom of my program notes at don'tletitgo.com. I've got 2 of the episodes, but apparently I think there's 13 different episodes. He's found these people who are just making wonderful handcrafted things in an excellent way and just giving them some publicity. Yeah.
Good. Well, I think we're almost at 2 hours, Amy. So I think we need
Thank you.
All right. Thanks, everybody. Those of you wondering what Super Chat is on YouTube, where you can ask a question and attach a dollar amount to it so that you are contributing to the Yaron Brook Show by asking the question. And I prioritize those because I like money and it's a way for you guys to support the show. And because there's so many questions, there's no way to prioritize them. Dollars is one way to auction off my time. My time is valuable. If you don't think so, don't ask me a question. If you think it's valuable, put a dollar amount on it. $1, $2. Somebody did $100 the other day, and that's where I answer. Another way to support both Amy and me is through Patreon. You can go to patreon.com. You're on Brook Show or Amy Peikoff, and you can support the show there. I think. For every 10 people who are listening to this right now, only one of you has actually supported the show. So we could be 9 times bigger in terms of the financial support, in terms of how much I invest in the show. So I know a lot of you listen to the show, but you hate it. I know you've said that on the super chat, on the chat, which is kind of funny, but wasting 2 hours of your time on something you hate. But that says a lot about who you are. But those of you who like the show, I hope you support it. You can do so on Patreon. You can also do it on PayPal, paypal.me/Yaron Brook Show. All right. I don't think we have a show next week.
I thought we did.
I'm flying.
Oh, okay. Maybe
the week after that.
Is that what we have?
Yes.
Okay. I thought I had a different thing in my calendar, but we'll work it out later. No worries. Whenever I see you again, I'll see you. I enjoy doing these shows. Thank you.
Good. No, absolutely. Okay. We'll do it next Saturday. Thanks, Amy. Thanks all of you for listening. Thanks all of you for making the chat so interesting. Thank you who listen after the fact. And I will be on Monday interviewing Alex Epstein from what is it? The Human Flourishing Project and his work on the industrial progress and on energy. So we'll be talking to Alex Epstein on Monday, 5 p.m. Pacific time. I hope you all tune in. Should be a fascinating conversation. See you in a couple of weeks, Amy.
Okay, great. Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye, everybody.